How are you, friends? I think Sridhar laid a very good pitch already, so I'm going to come to you last on this panel because you had a lot to say and you stole a lot of ideas away.
Thank you.
You really, I think, got people excited, and I think Satya, anyway, does a brilliant job wherever I've heard him. And if people want to go and see Satya afterwards, he can keep you very well entertained personally and professionally, I assure you that. How many of you are familiar with Project Loon? Project Loon. Have you heard of the Google balloon? Yep. What percent of the world do you think has internet on their phones today? By the way, do you know by the end of this year there will be more mobile phones than people on the planet?
Yep.
By December you'll have more phones, more handsets than people. But what percent is actually covered by the internet on the planet? Is there a number? 20%. At any time? Once Project Loon happens, it's already happening in New Zealand. It's probably up there, that balloon out there, somebody's accessing it. Mm-hmm. If you have balloons all over you, then that whole last mile takes on a new meaning altogether, right? Mm. Because that balloon won't even be a mile away from you.
Right.
Isn't it? Just imagine. Can you think how telecom will change if those balloons are up there? Do you think you'll need fiber in your homes? Do you think you'll need wires anywhere? Do you think you'll have devices that are all just going to talk to that balloon? I don't know. IPv6 out anywhere yet? We might need an IP10, yeah. What's happening? What is Twitter doing all around the world? People keeping track of, I don't know how many presidents or prime ministers Egypt is going to change that Twitter is, and I don't know what role Twitter plays in that. Do you think Twitter plays a role in what's happening in these uprisings and what happened in Afghanistan? Yeah. Is that changing the world? How many of you are familiar with, anybody from telecom here? Anyone from telecom, from telcos? You guys working on data monetization? You know what these telcos are doing? They're watching what you're doing with data geographically. And they're going to figure out what you're doing with data geographically, and they're going to, one way or the other, provide that information to every other service provider so that they can target services to you, right? And you don't even know what's happening in the back. So, I don't know if I want to call this technology disrupts business alone. I think technology has disrupted our lives, and I think that's really what we're talking about. And why do we use the word disruption? Why aren't we just saying that, I have these phones, I have these devices, I'm happy, it's great? Why do we use the word disruption? Does someone want to take a cake on that? Why do we call this disruption in the first place?
Well, I don't think it is disruption, but can you hear me? Let me figure that out. There's a minor disruption here.
This is a disruption.
Is that better now? So I'll probably hold it. I don't think it's disruption. It is just that the pace of change that we were used to and the pace of change at which it is happening now is completely different. And most people I can speak about, including myself in this room, are probably used to a pace of change that was relatively slower. So when now, probably to my son, right, or somebody in that age group, that pace of change is the way they live. So for them, it is not disruptive.
So it depends on who you are.
It depends on your viewpoint.
So we call it disruptive because all that young generation and the users and the consumers are getting ahead of people like us who actually gave it all to them in the first place.
Possible.
Yes, Sridhar.
I strongly think it is a disruption. But only thing is, how do you want to connote it? Do you want to give it a negative connotation? I believe anything that upsets a current equilibrium is a disruption. It could be positive, it could be negative. You've been going in a certain manner, in a certain pace, with certain resources, and that led you somewhere.
So actually, let's say that this is not a disruption. What is happening is a revolution.
It is still a disruption.
It is still a disruption.
It is still a disruption.
So even a revolution like the kinds in Egypt is a disruption.
Yes.
Yes. It disrupts their way of life. And what is happening in Egypt is also a disruption because people could not take what was happening around them. So anything that upsets your current equilibrium is a disruption.
So something somewhere Satya said about wife and things like that. I want to figure out later on how to use that there. Anyway, I think clearly, what lies, something that is visible to all of us in terms of disruption is mobility. Very clearly, I think that's the number one disruptor, if you will, driving commerce, mobile CRM, corporate apps going mobile, future offices going virtual. This isn't Google Glass, but wearable technology. And I can wear a Google Glass and look you in the eye and say, damn you, I'm intruding your privacy, what can you do about it? Social. I think social channels, which is really where the young generation is coming in and driving it. I'm still not as avid at Facebook as Venkat here. Because I know every moment where he is, whenever I go on there. So collaboration, virtual organizations, online buying. I think buying is going to become completely different. It's changing the retail scenario completely. Yeah. And Satya gave us a tour of SMAC already, but there's just something to add is the way Gartner actually calls this the nexus of forces.
Yep.
If you're using two or more of social, mobile, analytics, or information, that creates extreme transformational possibilities. So, Vidya,
Yep.
transformation. How do you think it's impacting, the 5 fields that you talked about?
Yeah, the 5 fields that I was talking about was the first one being retail, which you spoke about, hospitality, health, which I think Venkat is going to cover soon, in the government. How many of you have heard of Fuzzle from Intuit? That's an Indian context-based application which is actively used in the mobile space. And finally, in the government space, the social. There's something called as M-Pesa. Have you heard of M-Pesa or M-Paisa? In India, it's launched as M-Paisa. How it started was in Kenya and in Tanzania, they noticed that the telephone carriers noticed that the airtime was transferred to their relatives or given as credit to them. So what they did was they capitalized on it and they tried to see how microfinance can reach. So now the banking industry potentially could go away. Maybe it might be non-existent pretty soon. And I don't know whether Sridhar would call it disruptive or Chetan would call it, what did you say? It's a change, right? It's a place of change. But that's what is happening. In Kenya and Tanzania, there is a cashless transfer. They use this airtime. The precursor was transfer of airtime. And now they use this to transfer money. And it's the fastest growing. Did you know that it's reached where their volume is so high, it's much more higher than Western Union. In Afghanistan, it was launched as M-Paisa, and the salaries of the police department is being paid there. And finally, in India, we've just launched it, and I guess we're going to see how it works. But
wow,
yeah.
Just like the euro unified Europe, you could have a currency that unifies the world.
Yes.
On mobiles.
Yes.
And you wouldn't know what the hell happening to the rupee, whether it's 62 or 61 or where the hell it's yeah. So, Venkat, you want to take away from there and get us into what e-medical healthcare, whatever, is going to look like? And I hope I don't have to use it either way.
I hope you not. Just to give you a background, I handle IT for 3 organizations. One is the pharmaceutical business, the other one is the hospital, and the third one is the foundation. And all of them are related to health in some way or the other. So if you look at it, for example, the foundation, we have mobile vans which go to villages where people have not seen the doctor. People have never seen a doctor in their life. And today we have a van which has a doctor, a helper, and a driver traveling in remote parts of the country. Currently, we have about 100 vans. Now, the issue was when you have the doctor meets a patient, so he writes it in a register, and he keeps on doing that. But there was no collection of data. So, for example, it was not a need. People have lived like that for many years. But then the requirement that came up was, suppose we get all this data in a central way, and we could start analyzing this data and find certain trends. For example, if in the area of Nagpur, there is a lot of malaria happening, or in the area of Visakhapatnam, there's a lot of cholera happening, there could be some information that could be transferred to the government, however inefficient we governments are, but then at least you'll be in a position to find the trend and do something about it. So a lot of these, mobile has really helped to get into those areas. And with what Sunil is talking about, the Google balloons, the biggest challenge we face today is the last mile. Most of the data is collected onto Samsung iPads, and whenever they get connectivity, the data gets transferred to the central server. If we had this Google balloons, possibly we could get those data much faster. So in the last 1 year, we have been doing so many mobile applications in this entire area of health. The other area we found was, for example, just look at the, if a villager had to get a urine sample, urine testing done, he had to go travel about 50, 70 kilometers to get a urine testing done. Today, we found, 3 or 4 IIT students got together and developed an application with an iPhone or an Android device, and in 4 minutes flat, we get the entire 10 different tests that are done on urine is available with us. And that data gets integrated into the patient information system, which is another handheld device. So now you have 2 handheld devices. One is a Samsung device, the other one is an Android, 2 distinct one, and the data has to get integrated. So that's another new challenge that comes up when the data has to travel to the central server, it comes back to the local machine. So a lot of complexities are getting created in this whole mobile devices. We are getting into another area where we are talking about work-life balance for our salespeople. We have about 3,000 salespeople in the field. They almost, they see about 10 to 12 doctors a day. At the end of the day, they have to go and update all the doctor visits to a website. Now, if I can give them a handheld device and entire thing can happen online, they save about 30 minutes a day, which they can go and spend home, go and spend time with their family. So if you look at it, mobile has really made a major inroad into the hospital and healthcare business. We have gone to another level where, for example, if a heart patient after a surgery goes home and we are in a position to monitor him remotely, he doesn't have to come back to the hospital on a regular basis to have a checkup. That's a huge trauma that he's in a position to avoid. Because coming to the hospital, if you're in Bombay, the amount of traffic that he has to follow, he has to reach the hospital, have a checkup done, go back to home. It's a very traumatic experience. And if we can monitor some of the vitals, for example, we can see that today he has walked about 10 steps, and which the doctor had recommended, and we can monitor it, it will really help him to heal faster. So a lot of ideas are coming, and today to a large extent, my job as an IT is no longer there. More and more, I've become more like a broker, marriage broker. Meet 2 people, try to marry husband and wife, or 2 people to get them married. Here, I'm trying to do a customer or a requirement with the product that's available in the market and trying to marry it. But at the same time, I have to ensure that it works efficiently, securely, and consistently over a period of time.
So that broker is an interesting point, and I'll come back to that at that stage. How many of you like cars? How many of you like a nice car? People don't like cars here.
Yeah, that's very few.
Yeah. I thought men liked cars and women didn't. The world has changed though. What with all this disruption? There's disruption there. Yeah. How many of you like gadgets in your cars? Stuff in your car. Now you have more hands. Now you're talking. That's where we are going. So we have Jagdish Paliwal here from Tata Motors, right? And we were actually debating whether the Nano was a successful project earlier or not.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's a disruptor. And that's what this subject is about, right? It's about disrupting. Creating a car for 1 lakh. Can we give that company a round of applause, please? So at the last Consumer Electronics Show in the US, I think it was revealed that the 80% of the IP in a car of the future is going to be IT and not engineering. Can you share with us what's coming?
So let me quickly touch upon the Nano first. Nano had a lot of technology in it. It had a lot of innovation in it.
We need a little more volume, please.
When it came to the IT for Nano, we actually put the best of IT out there. We adopted open source. We put a social site out there. Nano was retailed on the internet. But despite everything, we have had huge learnings in why it did not succeed. And that was actually if I have to put one phrase on it, it is the aspirational nature of the consumer. we've done enough market research, and what we figured out is that the media, made it a laktakia. Okay. And the way it was, flogged by the media, and the kind of brand perceptions which got built around it were not really aspirational. And that probably sort of, but I think we are still at it. We've not given up. Coming back to just to do some stargazing on automobiles, a lot of stuff already happening out there. For example, driverless car, right? What Google is working on. If you look at the amount of, if the amount of number of capabilities which are going in there, if people start using a few of them here and there, it could change the way you drive. It could reduce accidents. It could reduce, it could prevent you from falling asleep. There are already things, but then there are a whole host of stuff it can do to you. In terms of, what are the things that we are looking at, telematics is a big area. In a way, if I want to call it connected vehicle, okay. So if you put a GPRS chip on your car, actually it can communicate with a central server. You could put some strong analytics out there, and it can predict failures before they happen. So you don't need to go to the workshop. The workshop will call you before a failure happens. That's called remote diagnostics. A lot of work happening on that. On the consumer side of it, integrating your mobile device with the car seamlessly as you come into it. You could actually communicate remotely with your car because it anyway has a chip. So you could actually control it through an app. And once you get in, the way the whole control happens through the mobile, right? That's on the consumer space. Purely on a B2B, we are also into trucks. Our bread and butter is trucks. We are getting into, we are doing a lot of consumer, we're trying to take a lot of consumer insights in terms of, what kind of, how do we have something called a real-time logistics, right? Let's say the same truck having a chip, how can we control, where it goes? Does the driver take a detour and take it to his village? It happens now. It happens today. There's fuel pilferage. There's complete indiscipline out there. So a lot of things, just by tracking the movement of the vehicle, by using simple things like geofencing, the number of possibilities it generates are enormous. Just a couple of examples. You could have the entire Mumbai-Delhi route as a geofence, and the truck will go on that. If it goes away, if it takes a detour, you get an alert. Similarly, you have your operations, you have your warehouse in Delhi. You could build a geofence 50 kilometers around that, and if a truck enters, that moment your logistics department starts planning for getting this truck out in the fastest amount of time. So lesser choking of your warehouse space. So there's a lot of work in that area in making connected vehicles, in using technology to sort of get your transporters better value out. And end of the day, if you really look, step out and look beyond, it's actually, it will also, a vehicle will not be a vehicle any longer. It will be an ecosystem that you interact with. Exactly. And it will have its own ecosystem around it.
So what are the other areas you think, other than a car, that you will have the same ecosystem going? You're really talking about the Internet of Things. Absolutely. Here, right?
Absolutely.
So, and maybe then this is a correct point to switch into what are the challenges for the group here. What does really this, and this is open to everybody here, what does this open up the possibility to? How can we, as people responsible for delivering and managing this change, respond rather than react? Because more often the experience is that the pace of technology is faster than we are anticipating, and we seem to be caught short by what the user wants, by what the boss wants, by what the other people in the C-suite want. We seem to be at the short end. Why are we not more proactive?
Just, if you take from Jagdish what he mentioned about the connected vehicles, The next generation would be, for example, the insurance companies want to know at what speed were you driving. If you had an accident, maybe the hospital would like to know. Or, today you have a treadmill which can monitor your heartbeat. In the same way, your steering wheel can monitor your blood pressure, and someone remotely can monitor whether this person is suffocating or something is happening. So I'm sure this whole opens up lots of new areas that's going to get connected from what data is going to come from the car. So, to some extent, what you mentioned, we are already doing in our mobile vans, where we track a mobile van through a GPS system, so that we know that they are going the track they were meant to go, because we spend money on the diesel and petrol, and so that we don't want to waste money, and we know how many kilometers they traveled. We also are doing an attendance system for the doctor and the driver, because we want all the three people in the vehicle. So at every 2-3 hours, we want to track him, again through a mobile, that where was he every 3 hours. So because the doctor can easily say to the drivers, you know what, you go home, I will drive the car and go and treat the patients and come back. And when he takes it home, whether he takes it home or just he drives around. So I think it's already happening, and I see a huge amount of information that's going to come out will become helpful. Many years back, I used to work for TVS Motor. We had something called Milk Run, where a truck will go to the areas of Ludhiana and those parts of the world where you collect all the parts and come back to the factory. So we knew exactly when the truck is going to come, so that we don't have any inventory issues. So some of them are happening, and some more will happen.
Chetan, you were elucidating some examples about how BYOD is causing disruption. That even though the company is planned for it,
We were talking about
can you
it
just expand on that?
Yeah. Let me first sort this.
It's fine.
It's fine? Yeah. So, each one of these things, the way I look at it, and I'm going to take a bit of time on this, right? Each one of these things, that what we talked about, rapid pace of technology, right? That's there to stay, right? Question is, how well are you going to be harnessing for your organization, right? If you look at business or personal. There's more and more power coming onto the hands of the end user, right? So every guy in your office, when he walks into the office, is probably already carrying a very powerful computer than you provide him on his desk, right? It can do a whole bunch of things for him or her, right, that individual, that you probably do not provide him in the office environment in order for him to be productive. So it's putting a lot of back pressure on the organization and on the CIO, saying, because people are becoming more aware, right? There's a lot more power, and it's only going to increase, whether from a pure form factor point of view, whether it's wearable devices, whether it's, it's going to be the next mobile phone or a watch or whatever, but end result is there is what compute power used to be at some point in time available at the back end, today is available to the person at his fingertips, and he or she, in all likelihood, is not an IT professional, right? And it's simplified for him or her to use to make himself more productive. It's causing some interesting things, even in our own organization. I know Satya briefly alluded to it, but we discovered, and this is an anecdote that I would definitely like to share, that we discovered that in a part of IBM, right, somebody senior went and he realized that he wasn't able to log in to the Wi-Fi, right? And the whole thing, when you dug deeper, you figured out Wi-Fi is working, everything's fine, but you provided for X number of ports, but each guy is walking in with 2 extra Wi-Fi devices that he logs in, right? He's got a tablet, he's got a mobile phone, right, and he's already working on a Wi-Fi in the office. So what bandwidth are you going to provide for?
Are there companies that don't allow people to come in with devices today? Are there companies that don't allow people to bring devices?
You don't, because you will be pressured, right, by your employees. Why would you not allow somebody to bring devices?
But when you talk about devices, you're talking about smartphones, because even now the banking industry, they're very strict about it. You can't just take laptops, or you can't walk in with your own personal device.
So Vidya, on that, you were talking about smartphones, feature phones, whatever, and the impact that is shaping into our every generation that exists today. So, starting with the X, the Y, and the Z. Can you elucidate on that?
Yeah, so I think most of us are discussing or are talking about it, especially the Gen Y, because they're saying by 2025, 75% of our workforce is going to be Gen Y. And there is some kind of a perception about them. They find them very tech savvy, so they find them very arrogant. They are the guys who keep asking. I don't want to generalize it, but in general, that's a perception that Gen Ys, any Gen Ys here who were born after 1980 and before 2000? Aha, so quite a few Gen Ys. So that's the perception, because when they walk in, I remember when I first joined Workforce, it took a week for me to get my desktop set up, to get my phone set up, and to put the applications. But nowadays, these guys walk in, especially even in ThoughtWorks, we allow you can bring your own device, you can bring your laptop, and you can choose what you want. And they walk in, and what they have is they already know what they want. The application is already there. And this leads to a lot of issues. I think Sridhar and Satya actually did speak about it. It spoke about the privacy. And the privacy issues with respect to employees, because CIOs have to really look at that fine line. When is it a privacy with respect to employees? When is it something got to do with the organization? How much data can they really allow them to share? Because Gen Y seem to be always connected. Actually, you were talking about it, Sunil, how like one of his friend, he was in the ICU and still he was so engaged with the people where he updated his WhatsApp status to I am in ICU. And I'm sure there are many people out here who do that. And I think Venkat is one of them, right? Just kidding. But
You'll come to know that I'm dead.
so they always want to be
The
connected.
power to
That's-
predict.
So that's one of it. Like, they want to be connected. That's a constant in their communication. The second is in enterprises before, we had all these functional verticals. We had devs, we had QAs. Even now, I think many of the enterprises have these functional verticals where there's a VP for each of the verticals who reports into the CEO. And when a project is given, there's cross-functional teams formed. Because at least a decade ago, we were talking more about utilization. But now, there are these verticals which are collapsing. DevOps is a very perfect example, and we've seen as we go more to the clients, we've noticed that this is a function which has really collapsed, and because of the Gen Y, they are driving it. They have this philosophy of get it right now. We want it now because they have not seen the modem age, which means that you need to have a continuous delivery, continuous deployment, the products, and we've actually ThoughtWorks had to develop a product because of that. Like, we realized that was a huge potential. Sorry, I did a sales pitch too. Sorry.
So that's the product for this community?
It's a continuous delivery and continuous deployment is very key, right? Everybody is talking about it. Let it be healthcare. It's vertical agnostic, and you need it.
So, I think, Venkat, you spoke about your role as a broker. Is there a solution in this for this community, apart from yourself? What kind of solution do we need? What do we need? First of all, what is the challenge? How do we define the challenge for this community? What is it that we need to do to be more proactive? Let's try and get some answers here.
Okay.
And the answers can come from here. The answers can also come from there, right? Because some people here have answers. I think between us, for different problems, we have answers.
See, the requirements are coming on a daily basis. It's on every day you have some new requirement coming, and you keep on juggling, saying that how do I connect this to that, and finally, so it's becoming so fluidic. For example, when we decided to go for a handheld device for patient information system, suddenly something else popped up saying that we also would like to integrate ECG with that or a stethoscope with that. We're going to have telemedicine on this. So it's all suddenly new requirements are coming. So I don't think you're going to have a long-term plan.
You need to understand your business's ecosystem.
Right.
Whether
That's
it's
right.
health or you need to understand the whole ecosystem and see how I'm going to get it all to
Right.
work together.
Correct, exactly. So you for example, when I went to a telemedicine location in somewhere in Karnataka, you had one box, so it had multiple ports. So depending upon what you want to insert, you have a stethoscope, insert it. If you want to have a ECG, connect it. If you want to have a blood pressure monitor, connect it. And then you connect your video monitor, and you are talking to some doctor somewhere in Bombay or Bangalore. So it's becoming like that. So you need to have theoretically a software or a platform which is keep on connecting as and when whatever comes in.
Sridhar, you had something to add.
Yeah. So deviating a little bit from the tone of the conversation, I'm just able to visualize two different things. Right? One, and I talked about it, which is how do you understand what the user wants? If you think about Stephen Covey's statement, begin with the end in mind. Right? So who is the user? So whether it is a practitioner of medicine who has to go to that remote place in Karnataka and be able to put in any of the devices, or whether it is a user who's able to bring in any device at any point of time, the first thing is to understand what the user wants. And in the context of the organization, what is the ecosystem? And let me take examples. Today, what is the biggest thing that the banks want to do, or any financial institution wants to do? You've got a lot of peripheral projects, you've got rural banking, you've got financial inclusion initiatives. Why? We need to reach out to them and make it easy for them to be able to access the resources. You take telecom, for example, we said we are able to enable all sorts of applications and usages because of the mobile phone in our hands, right? You take any industry, it is all user driven. But this is the second point. The second point is, what enables all this? Whether it is social media, whether it is the mobile revolution, whether it is any of those, what enables all this? The Generation Y. They're able to get connected and they're able to share information. Just one aspect. Break boundaries.
Right.
The traditional thinking for all of us has been to create boundaries. The world we are moving into is about breaking boundaries.
I thought it's boundaryless.
Yeah. But first break them.
Yeah.
Then make it boundaryless, right? So the point is, any of us in our respective organizations, we need to be able to break boundaries, whether it is to be able to actually remotely diagnose the person when he is driving, or whether it is being able to understand or have an unmanned car. It's about breaking the boundary. To be able to diagnose remotely, to be able to transfer money to somebody, or to be able to get connected to a friend who lives in some other part of the world, or maybe, who knows, in space as well. Tomorrow you will have connectivity to Mars, tomorrow you will have connectivity to the moon. So the point I'm making is, at every point of time, we need to think about how do we break the boundaries that exist today in enabling the
This
ecosystem.
group is used to defining policies.
Exactly. That's the second. That's the downside. You need to definitely create the security walls. And I think Satya also talked about it. As you begin to break boundaries, you begin to create some of those safeguards.
So we need to make
Safeguards.
policies how to break boundaries.
You need to safeguard. You need to build a safeguard. So I would think, understand the user is one bucket, breaking boundaries is other, but build the safeguards along with that is the other. So I would think these are just the two things that we've got to think about.
Jagdish, you're waiting to say something.
Yeah. It's like as the business keeps changing, I've always had this question because I come from business. I worked half of my career in customer service. When you want to do something, so there are basically, you require people, right? So when you require people, your HR goes, gets people, immediately, you get somebody who's the best suited and then you do a backfill there, right? You need some money, right? Which is what gets passed through a small process. And of course, to scale it up, you also need, some technology is required today whatever you do in business. Why does it take so much of time, right? And it kind of gels very well with what we are all talking about, the pace of change and the new things keep coming up on a daily basis. How do we manage? I mean, I want to touch upon something, which I call as capacity for change. Okay. There are few elements of it. So the first element is the people element. How many of us have got teams where you have some amount of bandwidth in terms of time as well as in terms of capability, okay, to run experiments, to keep creating capabilities before you are bombarded with the real projects, right? And these POCs don't cost much money, right? So one of my tasks to my teams is that, keep a set of experiments ready with you where you know where things are going to fail, right? That's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it fundamentally is at an architecture level, okay? Probably everybody has forgotten the concept which was touted about 6-7 years back, which was SOA, service-oriented architecture. But think of it, entire mobility, all apps, they run on an SOA framework, right? So if we want to put our enterprises on mobile, our enterprises on social, and if we want to break these boundaries between an SAP and a Siebel and a Outlook, I think that connecting layer of service-oriented architecture is something which nobody will tell you to put in place.
So
it doesn't get talked about
anymore. What you're suggesting
anymore.
is that, I know we all know how we spend a lot of time firefighting, right? We spend time keeping the lights on. And I think, Jagdish, what you're saying is fight the fires, keep the lights on, but also look what's ahead outside the window on the horizon.
And create that capacity for change, internal capacity of change. Three elements. One is architectural. Second is from a quality point of view, which is testing, because anything that you do new, impacts somewhere or the other your existing architecture, and you're always worried. If you have strong testing mechanisms, that gives you that agility to change. And third thing is purely from a technology point of view, put an SOA framework in place which will break boundaries. That's when you start connecting at a process layer. You can actually create processes which cut across a customer requirement, comes to your CRM, then goes to your SAP, and then kind of brings back, something happens in CRM, something happens in SAP.
Chetan.
You make a very, very good point, right? Architecturally, at various points in time, I think it's important to review where you are, right, with respect to the changes. And probably the frequency of that review has to be much more closer, right, as compared to what it used to be, given the speed at which things are changing. But I'll come back to, I'll come back to something that more as somebody who runs a business, some feedback or some observations, right? One of the things that I believe is very important is, are you simplifying, right? We get so many things thrown at us, and an average CIO probably on a given day, I'm sure all of you, a lot more because all of you have come from very large organizations, from different partners to different vendors to different technologies to some of your own peers within your own company who just read an article yesterday in Harvard Business Review or Economic Times or some other magazine for that matter, or somebody tweeted and comes back and throws it at you, right? So the whole bottom line is, when you're sitting there to run a business, are you simplifying it? Are you simplifying it for yourself so that you have the bandwidth to do something new, right? The more complex it is, the more time it will spend for you to keep the lights on and keep managing things. So, and today there are tools available, right? There are tools and techniques available. So, how are you simplifying, or are you constantly looking at simplifying things for yourself as well as for your business, right? And for the people that interact with you. Second thing, and of course it's been talked ad nauseum, but it is reality, right? Tomorrow an 18-year-old juvenile sitting in Uzbekistan wants to prove a point, will hack into your system. You may not be a bank, you may not be the most sensitive government agency, but he did it just for kicks and interrupted your supply chain, right? He just did it for kicks, and one order for 50,000 tires went out somewhere else where it should not have gone, right? And there goes a disruption, or in a negative sense, right? There goes their entire planning. So it's, and given the power that today every individual who walks into the organization carries in his pocket, on his hand, or in his purse of computing power, it becomes very important that how well are you securing, right? It's kind of time. We've seen enough and more examples of this. We've seen enough and more things, incidences that get reported. And I guess the best way to believe is that the guy is always a step ahead of you,
Yep.
right? Whatever you are doing, he's always, that person who's doing it with a malified intent is a step ahead of you. So you have to be continuously on your toes, right? And the third important point, maybe some of the people here in the room do it, but how engaged are you with your business? The business pays for everything that comes into the organization. And I do want to tell that incident. I was telling Arun earlier in the discussion that about a month back, I happened to join IBM CMO in a marketing managers meet, right? And since I was paying, I was hosting lunch, and this is all heads of marketing from a large number of large organizations, including banks, financial institutions, consumer product, and so on. There was a big discussion around social and everything else, but I said, I call on a large number of CXOs on an average month. But in the last 6 months, I've met only 2 CMOs. Right? And I wonder how well engaged are you with your CIO? Right? Now, reason I mention marketing and sales is because these are the hardest guys in any organization to tame. Right? Because they bring in the revenue, they tend to have their own budgets, and they tend to, a lot of times, tend to do things that are in isolation with the rest of the organization. Right? The question is, you got to ask yourself, how well engaged I am in solving his problem? Right? How well engaged I am in simplifying things that they are doing that fall in line with the rest of the organizational policy or strategy. Okay? So these are the questions that I even in my business, though I'm a consumer of IT from a pure within the organization point of view, I'm a customer to my CIO organization, right? But I need to keep asking this and I need to keep asking that same question to them.
So I want to summarize this discussion unless someone has something significant
One
to add.
last point to extend what Chetan said. I totally agree with that. Just one last point to add. One of the things that came out in a small CIO survey that we did was that as you begin to deploy them, as let's say CIOs are more engaged with the rest of the C-level people in their organizations, dealing with the insecurity of that change in that particular business somehow becomes the CIO's problem. I'll take the example. So you talked about Salesforce having to be able to remotely log in and deliver the day's reports. But if they see that as an encumbrance, if they see that as a problem, dealing with the insecurity or dealing with the problem is not the CIO's, but it is that of the business. Now, so long as the CIO is able to draw that dividing line, clearly, they would prepare, they would innovate, they would do these POCs in the projects, but transfer the ownership to the business and say, put your money where the mouth is. Here's what I have. Here is what it can enable, but it's your problem to go make it happen. I think that's the one point that I want to add to what he said.
I want to take from what Sachin mentioned is, engaging with business. I think that's primarily the most important job today the CIOs have. I think I've stopped looking at keeping the lights on. In the sense, I don't think I want to worry about it anymore because it better run. The servers have to run, the powers have to run, the UPS have to run. I don't really care as long as people don't complain. In the sense, so you need to create an organization where there are other people who do the day-to-day transactional jobs and you don't get involved, because that keeps you free enough to get involved with the customers, to get to more deeper understanding of the business. The more you do it, the better you are. Otherwise, you'll continue to remain more an EDP manager trying to ensure that the PCs are running or the servers are running. I think we'll have to get out. In the sense, possibly once or twice a year, I try to spend time with the teams trying to say how much money you need for the budgets. Because if you want more server space or more data storage, that's something we discuss once a year, twice a year. Otherwise, I just want to make sure that it runs and I go home every day at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock and go home and have a peaceful sleep. That's something that has to be, that should become your one single point where you have a lot more time to spend with the other businesses rather than spending time to keep the things on.
So I think I'd like to summarize this discussion at this point, and just for the benefit of the audience, this is what I took away as an ex-CIO. Engaging with business really, from summarizes up to knowing what your users want. Not only knowing what your users want, but knowing where you are, where your function is in the business, right? Knowing what your users are going to do that needs to accelerate what you are doing. Knowing what your users are going to ask for that if you don't have is going to break your system. Correct?
Yeah.
With that knowledge, with that engagement, redefining the boundaries in which the business and IT operates. Creating capability, not just to be able to support, but be able to have teams that are able to look ahead and anticipate and manage and fulfill what's coming. Above all, simplify. Make it easier. Not technology for the sake of technology adoption is something we've said long back. Hopefully we're doing that, but how do I make it easier? And something that I like to add personally to all this list is the ability for each of us to be able to change ourselves.
True.
To be able to move out of the comfort zone.
True.
So, I'd like you to join me in thanking the panel for hopefully what was useful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Are we doing questions? No. Are we doing questions?
But the panelists here would like to field any questions that you would have for them. So they're right here on stage. If you do have a question, raise your hand. We'll try and make sure we have a mic sent to you.
I think that's a question.
Have a seat, Venkat.
And all our panelists, yes, please be comfortable on stage. Yes, please.
So my question to the panelist is, there is a digital world, and as a CIO, the constant challenge is we are fueling too much for the digital world. So yes, I need to feed my social media and get the data back. I need to worry about people getting their own gadgets into the organization. My worry is 80% of the India is still rural and is not in the digital world. So how do we deal with the polarization?
So how do we reach the masses which are not in the urban areas?
So there's
Which
a
is
digital
two things. One is to give them wait for Project Loon to happen. The second is the technology savviness that's required.
I'm going to take a shot at this, right? And I think it's a very advantage. Right? There have been instances of fishermen out in the coast in Kerala, and this is not now, this is 5 years ago, finding out that the fish rate is different in one place as compared to another, and turning the trawler in the other direction, right? So now these are the same people who earlier probably did not have the access to any form of technology. So in some form, this would be there. In India, there would always be a challenge because we have multiple languages, right? So there is another work that's been going on, and I would say, during the discussion when we talked about transformation, is more in the area of cognitive systems, right? As cognitive systems develop, right, and as they get learning with more knowledge on different languages, you would see a lot of these problems starting to reduce. I mean, anybody's guess whether they would go away or not, but they would start to reduce. So it's again coming back to simplification. If it's solving the individual's problem, and even if it is complex to use, the adoption is faster. And people make an effort to adopt it.
That's a good question, though, I think.
It's a fantastic question.
I'll just give my experience in Star TV, where for example you had about 130 million TV households as compared to almost 700 million mobile phones. So we used to actually make short stories, and which was available for people to listen on a charge of some 10 rupees for 30 minutes. So that we found was a huge, the huge consumption used to come from the rickshawalas of Bihar and UP, because they used to listen to stories, and it's a pure, all they had was a mobile phone, and short stories used to come to them, and all they paid was 10 rupees for 30 minutes. So information was reaching them, the stories were reaching them. So I don't think that divide is as obnoxious as you had earlier. It's much more shorter now.
But I think a revolution is really happening, isn't it? People are using mobile phones not just to see online content. They are going into department stores where they are paying money and getting videos and songs loaded onto this, and they can go and consume this without having a SIM card inside the phone. So there's education that can actually happen just by using that device for whatever it does.
So maybe let me also take a shot at it. So, it's Amartya Sen's famous quote that poverty is a function of distribution and not of production. So if you really see, especially with mobiles and, of course, with also satellite TV and all, the distribution has completely changed. Earlier, you had to run an adult literacy program, okay, find out teachers, and then, go out into the villages and then, do these literacy programs. Today, what I hear from a lot of people is that, you give somebody a mobile, he doesn't know how to read or write, but you know what, he'll find some youngster, and it won't take more than 24 hours for him to learn the basic reading and writing, for which government used to run programs earlier. So the whole digital divide, the more distribution sort of avenues open up, the more loans come in, the more rural broadband spreads out. I think people are hungry for information, and they will go for it.
Infrastructure, content, demystification is what is going to drive it. Build the infrastructure for such enablement, drive the content, multiple languages, whether it is education or government to citizen projects, that's second. And third, demystify. 0 to 650 million mobile phones have happened in some 7 years. But 0 to 650 million PCs in the homes have not yet happened. 650 million PCs would mean we have about a 65% or maybe a 50% penetration of PCs in the homes. It's less than 17%. So that, I think these are the three things that will drive it.
Any last question? Just one there.
Yeah.
The barman can get ready to open the bar.
Okay, we are talking about that generation Y is putting a lot of pressure.
Little louder.
Get it closer to you.
Yes, now we can hear it. We are talking about that generation Y is putting a lot of pressure on the CIOs. They are changing the way we used to work. Are there? Why we cannot think of them as well a companion or making them the part of that IT ecosystem? Because just to add to this story, 1 year back we have started with something. Generally, typically, whenever we are rolling out the applications, we do a lab testing in IT and then we roll out. Last year, we think of that we asked the people to volunteer about it, and a lot of people, of course, most of them are of Generation Y. They have volunteered to it, and it was one of the most successful projects. Now the business is doing in the same way. Whenever there is a project in my organization, the business asks that who would like to volunteer into that project. And there are people who are working onto that, voluntarily they are working onto it, and it is becoming a success story. So my question is that instead of thinking that Generation Y is putting pressure, why we cannot make them the part of our IT ecosystem?
You're absolutely right. Actually, that's the way going forward. I think we should collaborate and they should be part of the IT policy. A decade ago, it was the top-down approach where the CIOs they were coming up with these policies. We spoke about barriers, we spoke about safeguards, we spoke about how these things have to come up. But they are the right people, and I think they should be part of it, part of creating the IT policy. I totally agree with you.
So, one of the best ways to also engage with the Generation Y. See, anyway, it's always the next generation which has pushed the world to its envelope, right? At any point in time. So when we were our age, probably we also must have done something like that. Okay. Now, we need to find out those, connects. How do we sort of make the max out of it? So if they're pushing you for more modern technology at workplace, we don't look at it as the wrong thing. We look at it as the right thing. The wrong thing is, or what we need to change is, a whole host of, policies and processes around what we have built that need to change, and that will change for the better. Coming to your specific question, I think I do see now more than ever, a huge sort of potential for social media to inside the organization to capture that knowledge or to generate those ideas, okay, and to make our managements not just IT, but even why not HR policies?
True.
Why not our admin policies, right? To make everything much more participative and all resulting into greater engagement, right? The Gen Y also tends to get disengaged fairly quickly. So it's in everybody's good, and sort of it happens to be an IT solution. So we should take a lead on social media, but that's a good way to connect.
So it's all happening.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for your time, and thank you for your participation.